It's one of those government roll things, and we'll just take that one out of order, and that'll be a simple thing to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
And so let's go ahead and you up? Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Would you call the roll, please, ma'am?
Chairman Tamaez,
I'm here.
Board Member Beaver,
Here.
Board Member Hilliard absent, Board Member Rowe, and Board Member Sorrell.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. So first item of business is the approval of the minutes for the meeting that was held June 1st, 2023. Those were distributed to the members of this group earlier, and I'm looking forward to some comments or a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Terrell seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Okay, minutes are approved. So now, next part of the routine is for anybody who wants to speak for, against, or otherwise make any comment whatsoever during this meeting to stand up, raise your right hand, be sworn, so that we get all of that out of the way at one time.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
All right. We are sitting as four. You need four to pass and approve a variance or an exception. Since there is a matter that is fairly routine, that's item number 3 in the agenda, I'm going to pull that up out of order and handle that first. And so let's pull up file PZ 2023-255, request for variance to front yard setbacks for Jennifer Smith at 2375 Irving Avenue. Come up let's get the staff report first and let them roll through that, and then you come on up, okay? So if you would, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Afternoon.
Gosh, these speak, they're very sensitive. I forget that. Jennifer Smith of Tegrity Homes, LLC, is requesting a variance for the property located at 2375 Irving Avenue. Last month, variances for both sides and rear of the property were approved. The property is zoned RMH and requires a minimum front back setback of 25 feet. The applicant is requesting that front yard setback to be reduced to 20 feet for a new house to allow wiggle room to adjust the location of the structure as needed. As discussed last month, this will be a home provided through the Texas General Land Office Homeowners Assistance Program for Disaster Recovery. The lift that they have on the side, as opposed to a ramp for ADA, falls within the proper setbacks on their site plan, but it was right on the line, and I believe that's why they're asking for this setback additionally. So I can show you a couple of slides. The property in question is outlined in red. This is the setback, or the site plan rather, showing, I think, the new setbacks as approved last month, as well as they're asking for a 20-foot setback as opposed to a 25-foot setback on the front off of Stanton Street. And I have a picture of the house. You can kind of see on that left-hand side of the screen, the existing house faces the side street. The new house will also face the side street, but the orientation of the lot is towards Stanton, and that's why we call that the front property setback. So when you're looking at this photo, on the left-hand side of the photo, that is the setback that they're looking for in addition to the other three. We mail notices to property owners, 36 notices, and I've received none in favor or in opposition.
Are there any questions for us?
It was, but it's within, it's 25. Yeah. The lift can be in the setback, let me put it that way. We allow the lift to be in that setback, in the 25-foot setback. So we weren't worried about it, but they are concerned about it. And I think they want to make sure that in case anything changes, they've gotten that variance for it. but he's here. I think he can speak to it more
Yes.
if you like.
If there are any questions from Dina? Look, if not, then come speak to us. Go ahead and say your name one more time. Tell us your address one more time.
Todd DeWalt, 28310 Hollow Springs Lane, Spring, Texas.
All right.
Director for Integrity Homes.
Yes, sir.
The only reason we're asking for this, the current house sets over the 20-foot. It's 18.8 and 19.3 feet currently. We're going to have it further away from the Stanton Street than it currently is. But we just wanted to make sure we were safe with this as we go to get in there and we start to put those pilings in. We have had to adjust them in the past depending on what we find underground.
Okay. And this is GAO home.
Yes, yes, sir.
Lot size is?
The lot size on that corner, I want to say 50.
50 by 62. So it's a less than standard size lot.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what we need in the record. Any other questions for the witness? Anything else you want to tell us? If not, we're okay.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen. We have before us a request I'm going to fill out because if you would, I want these variances written specific as requested, please. So the request is a variance to the minimum front yard setback requirement, comma, Stanton Street, because if the home's still going to face the side, it's going to be a little confusing to anybody else. From 25 feet to 20 feet. Okay? That's the request, as I understand it. We good with that? Okay. Is there a discussion about that or a motion? Okay.
A second.
Mr. Sorrell stated. Okay. Would you call a roll for a vote, please, ma'am?
Chairman
I'm
Tamaez,
for it.
Board Member Beaver,
For it.
Board Member Rowe, and Board Member Sorrell.
For it.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. You're granted 10 days and you're up and running. All right. We're still missing one. Our concern is, I don't know there's going to be a problem. It's your choice, though. All right. Well, then we'll wait for a moment. Here's the deal. If you only have 4 of us, you need unanimity. If you got 5 of us, you can lose 1 of us. And still get 4 out of 5 and win. And so we don't make anybody go in front of a group of 4 unless they choose to proceed in a group of 4. And we're certainly willing to wait another 5 minutes and recess this and resume in another 5 minutes or so.
How soon can I come back and reapply if y'all did not approve it?
Well, we wouldn't make you reapply if you don't want to go today, or if you want to wait 5 or 10 minutes and nobody else shows up and you still don't want to go. What we would do is I would move to table it, and the next time we had a meeting, which would probably be August, you'd have a chance. And if we say no, then you're probably going to get no forever.
Well, how many of y'all are going to vote yes right now?
Well, we're not supposed to talk about that because, and I do this, we do this as a matter of routine because it's the right thing to do, irrespective of what we think, having reviewed the file. If I were you, I'd wait 5 minutes and see what happens and then make a decision. But that's just a suggestion.
See if he has a smile on his face or not when he comes in.
Okay. Okay. Why don't we recess until, let's say 3:20 and see if Mr. Hilliard comes in, okay? So let's go off the record and take a recess.
We're all gonna go out.
We're gonna, yeah, we're gonna go swim laps. And, yeah. All right, we're reconvened after a recess. Mr. Hilliard's with us. And we're calling for consideration file PZ 2023-230. Let's handle them one at a time because we'll vote on them one at a time. But let's hear the evidence for both right now and then just carry it over to the second, okay? Let's hear it all at one time.
So go ahead and address both of them.
Address both of them if you would, please. But let's pull this one for a vote, and then we'll pull the next one up and vote on it. We'll do the votes cleanly, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and state both.
Yep, it's 230 and 253.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Aaron Ward of Faust Engineering and Surveying Incorporated is requesting a variance and a special exception for the property at 6010, 6120 Mueller Creek Drive. They wanted to submit them together, but as one is a special exception and one is a variance, they had to submit them separately. So along the south edge of this, I'm sorry, I'm going to back up. The property backs up to an existing apartment complex. Property to the east was granted a similar variance in 2017. Along the south edge of the multifamily property, there's a 20-foot wide Entergy easement. This easement contains overhead power lines. The trees are not allowed within 30 feet of overhead power lines according to our ordinance, so they would not be allowed in the landscape buffer if there was one anyway. So they would, what would happen is the landscape buffer would end up being just a 10-foot wide green strip with no trees in it. So what they're asking for is a variance to that 10-foot wide grassed strip along the property line, along the north edge of their property line, next to the apartments. I did notice that they have placed their parking away from that property line. They've turned it towards the back of the building. So as I guess not to have the vehicles actually, maybe headlights as much facing into the property. But parking would be what they are adding and need that extra space for. The special exception is for off-street parking. The proposed development would require 165 parking spaces for shared parking in a multi-use shopping center, as this is intended to be. The requirements for miscellaneous retail, not a shared shopping center, would be 138 parking spaces. The project design, once they have, if they are granted the variance, will have 150 parking spaces. For the variance, they are required to they bear the burden of proof to demonstrate that they meet all three conditions necessary for approval. For the special exception, it's considered a deviation from the requirements of the zoning ordinance, and the 3 conditions are not required. So I do have a couple of photos to show you. The area outlined in red on your screen is the property in question. This is a site plan of the proposed development. The 10-foot wide landscape strip would be on the top edge of your screen along that property line. And if they have to have the 10-foot wide landscape strip, they won't have the proper space for backing out of those parking spaces to be able to have that line of parking all the way across the rear of the property. And this is a shot a little bit closer just to show it's undeveloped, but you can see kind of that utility easement along the south side of the apartment complex to the north, and how it's been pretty much left feral. And they have a fence on their side of that utility easement all the way across.
Back up one slide, please, for just a moment. Right there. Storm sewer easement, it's just an easement at this point.
Right, and
It doesn't have a buried sewer line, doesn't have anything in it.
no, and I have talked to our Public Works Department, and they've said they won't have a problem with the concrete in that easement as long as there are joints at the edge of the easement, so that if they need to get in there and work on something, they're only tearing up the concrete over the easement itself, and that's all that the property owner would have to replace then, is that's directly over the easement.
Okay, they've already worked that out with a property owner.
I don't know that the property owner has addressed that, but I
Okay.
contacted Public Works and asked them if, and they said that they would
Okay, thank you.
accept that.
Okay, I'm sorry, go forward. Appreciate it.
I just had one photo for you since the property's undeveloped. It's just vacant property. This is looking kind of from the west, looking more east across the property. And the trees that you see along the back edge, that's pretty much where that utility easement is with the power lines in it.
Right. Hey, Tom, turn on your microphone.
Crazy microphone. The aerial image, a couple slides back. That one, oh, I'm sorry.
This one?
So the property on, our adjacent property owners, did you say one of them had been granted?
On the
On the
east
right.
side of the property, kind of over at
TSO,
Old Dallin Road there, yeah, TSO and all that. They had requested and received a variance on the back side, or north edge of their property line for the same purpose.
And it looks like even to the west, they don't have that landscape buffer either, do they?
If you look at it, it looks like to me,
It's hard to tell.
it looks like the whole property lines are kind of skewed on here. They don't quite line up with the aerial photography. But the property on the west end looks like their concrete's a little further to the south.
Okay.
So I think they probably provided the 10-foot wide landscape buffer.
They dropped it down. Okay.
But I think they had more room moving down away from,
Right,
because they're on that corner.
right.
any other questions of the witness?
So along the front, we'll still have the landscape requirements will be met along the front.
For the parking, any parking that's adjacent to the right-of-way would require a 6-foot wide landscaped strip.
So you're gonna do it in the front?
And did I read all the peninsulas are there? Everything that you need?
We have not reviewed this plan for landscaping. It hasn't been submitted for landscaping purposes, but they will have to meet the requirements of the ordinance, other than this one, if it's approved.
Maybe I read that in Mr. Faust's letter.
Any other questions of this witness?
We did send notifications to 14 property owners within 200 feet, and I haven't received any responses in favor or in opposition.
All right. You want to talk to us? Please, come, state your name, your address, your relationship to the property, and then tell us whatever else you want. And then I got a couple of questions.
All right. Excuse me. My name is Richard Faust with Faust Engineering and Surveying. Our address is 5550 East Tex Freeway, Suite O, in the wonderful city of Beaumont, Texas. And I am the project engineer. So that's my stamp, for better or for worse. So, not to rehash, but basically, the ordinance requires a 10-foot buffer between commercial property and residential property. And in that buffer, we have to plant trees. However, due to the existence of those overhead power lines, we can't plant any trees. So the buffer doesn't benefit the apartment complex because the trees aren't there to block the view of the building. So there's really no sense in having it. We are going to put the opaque fence up. We want to follow the spirit of the ordinance, but there's no sense of having a 10-foot wide strip of dirt back there, at least in my opinion, for a buffer that just isn't going to function as it's supposed to.
So as to that, if we were to word this as what you're, just in plain language, what you're requesting, what I understand is that you are requesting a variance to the perimeter landscaping requirements to eliminate that requirement across the back of the property, on the north boundary of the property.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
But we, of course, would put the opaque fence up.
we understand that. I'm just trying to word this so that when we have a motion, we know what to say.
Sure, I understand.
Okay.
And this was granted to the property to our east.
Right. Okay. And as to Mr. Rowe's question, when we back up to a second, to the storm sewer easement, have you already worked out a deal where you're putting some type of east-west expansion joint just to separate out the concrete, or what are you doing with that?
Yes, sir. We spoke with the engineering department, and they said as long as you give us an expansion joint on either side of the easement, so they can easily get to the storm sewer, that
Cut
they
it out.
do not have an issue with that.
And as to Mr. Rowe's question about and I think I saw something like that in your narrative that you sent in with the file, that you'd already worked out it looks to me like the peninsula is pretty much where you need them for breaks and curb cuts.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that's all standard. Is the only question as to the number of parking spaces is to reduce off-street parking requirements from those required by the ordinance to what?
Yes, sir.
To 150 spaces?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Part of that is because
that's fine.
we have some 10-foot wide spaces out there.
Right.
Because I always tell my clients, if you have a convenience store on the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the road, and you drive an SUV, and one has 10-foot spaces and one has 9-foot spaces, which one are you going to go to? Because, I mean, we all know how dinged up our cars get from the guy next door, and how hard it is to squeeze out of that door. And so the parking spaces adjacent to the front of the property, of the building, are 10-footers, and the rest of it are all 9-footers.
Okay. You don't know, the building's not built, you don't have tenants lined up already, I presume, right?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay. So we're not talking about knowing traffic rates and those kinds of things.
That's correct.
Okay. So the request then would be based upon spacing requirements for the parking spaces leaving adequate room to back out and simply running out of length and distance in the lot.
Yes, sir. The city ordinance requires a 24-foot wide driveway between the spaces in order to properly enter and exit those parking spaces, which we have provided. So we should all be good with that.
And that's understood. Understood. And so I think we've put enough in the record for that. That's right. The standards a little different, but it's not that much different.
The difference in the parking, 165 is based on what requirement?
Square footage.
Yeah, square footage on 1,000, but there's a difference there. There was something about the commercial use, right?
Right, so in the ordinance, it addresses shared parking for like a shopping center differently than it does individual retail uses. So if you just have a retail store sitting by itself, your parking requirements can be a little different than if you're in a shopping center with a bunch of different stores that are sharing parking. And because of the shared parking, this proposed development would require 165 parking spaces. If you were talking about the same amount of retail, but individual shopping, spots, then it would really it would be less. It'd be 138 parking spaces.
Yeah,
Splitting the difference.
yeah.
Okay.
And just to be clear, if the exception to the parking space requirement is granted, that does not reduce the number of ADA spaces that will be required?
I believe you're right.
Proportion of ADA space.
Does not reduce what? I'm sorry.
The proportion of ADA handicap
Oh.
spaces, you still have to keep it in proportion to the other parking spaces. And incidentally, this, it looks to me like there are two buildings in large part because there's a storm sewer easement between them. Is that, would you have put one building here, or would you have always had two buildings if you hadn't had the storm sewer easement?
I'm certain we would have put one building,
I think you probably would have. Okay.
but we are treating it as one shopping center when we do the 165 spaces.
Okay. Any other questions of witness? Anything else you want to talk to us about?
No, I just think 150 is a good count for this size project, and we have parked as many cars as we can possibly park on that piece of land.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so let's take these one at a time. The first item, PZ 2023-230, is a request for a variance to the perimeter landscaping requirements to eliminate the landscaping requirement along the north boundary of this property. Okay. Any discussion, questions, motion? Your pleasure.
Make a motion, we approve.
Okay.
BZ 2023-230.
Okay. Mr. Hilliard makes the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Beaver seconds. Would you call a roll for a vote, please, ma'am?
Chairman Tamaez?
I'm for it.
Board Member Beaver?
For it.
Board Member Hilliard?
For.
Board Member Rowe?
Okay.
Board Member Sorrell?
For it.
Thank you.
I need to leave you out, but we got 4.
We're 5 now.
4 out of 5, that's it. Hilliard's late, but he voted first. Sorry. All right, next up, PZ 2023-253 is the request for a special exception to reduce off-street parking requirements from that required by the ordinance, whichever might apply, to 150 spaces for this property in this development. Any other discussion, comments, questions, motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the special exception for file PZ 2023-253.
Mr. Rowe makes the motion.
I'll second.
We'll let Mr. Sorrell second. All right, would you call the roll for a vote, please, ma'am?
Chairman
I'm
Tamayo.
for it.
Board Member Beaver.
Or,
Board Member Hilliard.
4.
Board Member Rowe.
4.
And Board Member Sorrell.
All right, is there any other business to come before this group? If not, then we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Oh, my goodness. You're retiring?
What?